So what is so wrong with codependency? Basically saying that narcissism's bad, but so does codependency. What is the abuse of codependency?
People like simpler dichotomies, so we could create one. I've just thought for you now. You could broadly say that narcissism hurts other people, and broadly say that codependency hurts the codependent. So they're both maladaptive, but the cost could be outward to the environment or inward. But they're both maladaptive. Codependency is originally it's non-clinical. The closest clinical entity we have is dependent personality disorder. But codependency, we all know kind of roughly what it means, but it actually meant somebody who is an enabler of an alcoholic. Then there were some American ladies in the 80s who wrote 3 big best-selling books. I think one of them was called Women Who Love Too Much. And all 3 of them spoke about codependency from the point of view of women who stayed, largely women, but men as well, who stayed in abusive relationships. And that was called being a codependent. I just wrote a book called The Cult of One. Hey. And I redefined it back to the original Narsissist myth. So Narcissus is a Greek mythology. He was a beautiful Greek hunter who everybody loved, but he refused everybody. But his counterpart in Ovid's version of this myth was called Echo. She was a wood nymph, and she lost her voice. She was cursed by the queen of the gods as a punishment. So she could only echo the last 3 words that somebody spoke to her. She could no longer speak for herself. So I set up like a paradigm that was, you have narcissism, which is toxically yang, and then echo codependency, which is toxically yin. They're always on. They're always talking. It's all about them. That's toxic. We're always off. We're always listening, and it's all about others. That's toxic. This is more toxic for the environment. This is more toxic for us. But we do also manipulate people. We do also guilt trip people. We're ostentatiously self-sacrificing, and it pushes people to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. Plus, the sins of the codependent, now that we're on this, is we become bitter. Because, of course, if you give too much and you say yes to things you don't want to do, you're going to get cranky and bitter, because we're hoping, like little children, instead of saying, like you to do this for me in reciprocation thing and expect nothing, what we do is we hope, and we don't say what we want.
You're doing things hoping for a reaction. You're hoping to get something in return, like even just a thank you, you're the best, or I appreciate that, or you're so sweet, or whatever it may be. And also on top of that is a deeper hurt in the manipulation that you could try and achieve as a codependent, is that however you feel about me is how I feel about me.
Yes.
And that makes you do things to try and, feel better. But it's fleeting because it's inconsistent, because it's not you. Yes. So yeah, that makes perfect sense, that the narcissist will essentially hurt outside of them more than a codependent. A codependent continues to abandon themselves over and over again, and what they really want. And that's what makes them not real either, to some degree, is because, I don't know if this is something you struggled with, but I remember starting to ask myself the question, what do I want to do today? Like, what would make me happy today? And you don't have an answer at first. You're like, I don't know, whatever you want to do.
I want to serve my master today. That's what I want to do, because I'm a slave. Yeah, no, there's what you just said is interesting, and it points back to this key issue with the codependency and the narcissism. However you feel about me is however I'm going to feel about me. This is because codependency, echo codependency, we draw all of our sense of self from others, which is kind of weird. It's parasitic, and we're not really being ourselves. We're showing up, but we're not there. We're haunting our own lives. Is also codependent, because all of their sense of self comes from others. The narcissist and codependent were not allowed to develop a real, authentic self in childhood. It was simply verboten. So they never learned how to do it. They don't know how to access it. The narcissist also is in many ways empty. Everything they do is for the reactions they can garner from other people. This is called narcissistic supply. Everything they do is for narcissistic supply. They run out of that, and they experience a kind of death. They go into real critical collapse if they run out of that.
What is a codependent death? Is there an equal and opposite codependent death that they experience?
We're more resilient. We're much more resilient in that regard because, so like I said to you, like the false dichotomy, we love creating twos. We have like a two-party system, and there's two wings on a bird, and we have two eyes, and we have two hands. We're obsessed. I'm sure if we had three hands, we'd make everything into threes. So we go, here it is. Here's the issue on one side, and here's the issue on the other. So I've drawn this comparison between narcissists and codependents. Here's a pretty critical issue and difference for mental health. And this is why codependency isn't a clinical entity. We're not mad. we're neurotic, but not psychotic. We're not psychotic. They're psychotic. They cannot access reality untainted. We can. Codependents are pretty realistic. They can see other people. Narcissists can't. Codependents don't see themselves very well. Narcissists see the codependent usually better than they see themselves because there's not much there to see. But our connection with reality is much better. You show me a person who's been diagnosed like clinically by a clinician with narcissistic personality disorder. That's a very emotionally dysregulated person. You show me somebody who's a codependent, they'll be somewhere on a sliding scale of depression and anxiety, but they're not jumping out their skin with real internal suffering. Typically, not typically. And if they are, it's not because of the codependency.
I think it's only fair to understand not only what attracts a narcissist to some degree, but also this isn't a villainization game of like, oh, they are the only bad ones. It's trying to understand how to heal so that these things don't exist anymore. What is it that needs to be healed the most? Like what is like a macro solution for this?
My solution, as I say, this is 10 years of just trying to answer the question, how do I get myself out of this? And how do I get my clients out? My clients, the people who follow my material, my readers, how do I get everybody out of this? What do we do? If you start teaching self-assertiveness and boundaries, you're creating more neurosis. And what I've noticed when people do self-assertiveness courses and boundary setting courses, it just makes them belligerent and confrontational and false. And I'm like, that's not it. So I took it all the way down to, I think the self, and I met somebody who was narcissistically abusive. First of all, I wouldn't be very impressed by them. I wouldn't be so naive and impressionable as to believe their story of who they were. Second of all, so I wouldn't get involved with them. I'd just be like, all right, mate, nice story. See you later. Second of all, I wouldn't get involved with them. Third of all, I wouldn't be in a mad rush to fuse and merge with them if I had a self. Because if I have a self, and I have wants, and I have value system, and I have a morality. Morality is an important issue that we have to cover at some point. It's essential for recovery and to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I have a philosophy of life, and it's mine. I'm not going to get with people like this. And if somebody slips past the guard and gets in, I won't stay with them. And if I'm all the way in with somebody, like somehow I just fall asleep for 3 years and I get married and have kids with somebody, and I'm that much backed into the corner in a battle, and I've got all of that to deal with to get out, how am I going to be able to do it? I must have a functioning self. It's the only way. So the good news is, if people come to me now with the issue of codependency, having been in a narcissistic abusive relationship, I'm like, hey, I'm not only going to get you over this relationship, make sure it never happens again, but I believe I can help. If I can take you on the same path I walked down, I can put you back to life because you're not living and you never were.
Yeah.
So you'll actually enjoy a quality of life that you never had before because you weren't a person before. So then you move.
Well, you weren't. You don't know who you were because you don't know you. So how do you make you happy if you don't even know you? You mentioned a word that I'm really curious what it means. Get past the guard. You said if they get past the guard, what is the guard?
We all have boundaries, or we should do, and those boundaries are based on filters. And every once in a while, somebody will get past your filters and your perceptual boundaries, your moral boundaries of what you think is acceptable. And that's normal. The problem I found with codependents is we don't have good boundaries. We're either very intimate and close, or the person's a stranger. And I was like, wow, that's weird. I figured that out one day with one of my clients. We were laughing about it.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't even really speak good English, so we would do therapy in like broken English. And I was like, oh, the way you are is you're not a house with a garden path and a gate and a road. You're just a bedroom. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, normally they say, hi, can I come in? Then you open the gate, they walk up the path, then they open the door, then they go in the living room, and then maybe they get to go upstairs, and then maybe they go in the bedroom. But that's not happening. There's just bedroom. There's no gate, there's no door, there's no nothing. You have a binary state with your boundaries. Someone I don't know, someone I'm literally doing the most physically intimate things possible with. Total boundarylessness. And people who live on a sliding scale of that, even if it's not as severe as that case, you can see right off the bat why that's a problem. Like you can't live like that. You have to have multiple degrees of boundaries, and everybody's experienced it. You've got a friend who's a good friend when they're out there orbiting out there, but you bring them into a closer orbit, doesn't work. That doesn't mean they're a bad friend and you should get rid of them. That just means they stay in that place where they were before. That's where you keep them. That's somebody you say hi to at the gym. That doesn't mean you're going to go on a goals holiday with them.
So is this indicative of both sort of polarities, overreaching for intimacy on some level, wanting to be accepted, but not ever being able to get there because you don't know yourself well enough or you don't love yourself well enough? So it's sort of just this, it's sort of this catch-22 that keeps missing, but it's actually a desperate attempt for intimacy. If you like this clip and you want to hear the whole episode, click at the bottom of your screen.